Yeah, well, it is what it is. So I had really rough time with this one. Not putting it together, but assembling it. And I know it sounds the same, but like I knew what I wanted to speak on. I started looking into it, and it never, like all week long, I was trying to make the time to put it together. And I just felt like I never had enough time to really assemble it. So I hope and I pray that this comes off well. Sorry, internet people, I'm just walking down to get a remote. I'm not leaving the camera, I promise. People watching freak out when the subject leaves the... Oh man, where did he go? What happened? The subject matter is gone. Nope, just the weirdo talking. Okay. So, I'm going to start by telling you a story. Once upon a time in Chicago, here's another story, part 2. Once upon a time in Chicago, there was a very, very young boy that was born in 1901. And this boy had I don't want to say issue, but he had a little bit of a twitch about him. He had a desire to tell stories, and he didn't know how to tell stories. He was very, very young. It wasn't until he was about 3 years old that he got a hold of a pencil and a piece of paper. And he started scribbling and scribbling and scribbling. And eventually, he ended up becoming a very, very talented young child. He actually ended up going to drawing and illustrating schools, like classes. He enrolled himself in these classes at a very young age in Chicago. And at about 18 years old, he got a job as one of the top illustrators in Chicago. And so you'd think, this boy, yeah, wow, this is great. You know, I have this desire, I have this talent. He really went for it, and the Lord blessed him with it, and it got developed. And he just still had this itch in him that there was something more. There was something more going on. So he did something a little crazy. He pulled his brother along and said, "Hey, brother, let's go to Burbank, California, and let's go start a company out there for the purpose of telling stories." I think you know where I'm going with this one. Good, good. Who's that, guys? Walt Disney. Walt Disney was born in Chicago, and his whole life was just that. He had this burning desire to tell stories through art. And now I don't mean art as an abstract art, but actual genuine illustrations. Now, mind you, in 1901, I'll tell you right now, the illustrative arts was very new. It was just on a burgeoning era, okay? We were kind of in our upswing of the Industrial Revolution, and so entertainment started becoming, if any of you have studied cultures in the past, this is kind of what happened. Technology would advance in civilizations and make life a little bit easier, and so things like art. The Greeks did this, the Romans did this, and art would start burgeoning through. And so what ended up happening was he began to realize that as he was going through this, that telling stories shouldn't be spontaneous. Now, mind you, moving pictures was a thing back in those days, but most moving pictures were very short. They're actually, I find it actually kind of funny. You guys know a lot of the TikToks and a lot of the Instagrams and a lot of stuff like that nowadays. What are they? How long are they? A minute, maybe 2? Yeah, 30 seconds. Right. Guess what they had back then? Yeah, moving pictures was just that. They were snippets. They were snippets of stories that were more or less spontaneous. And it was saying, this is many years later, but like even Charlie Chaplin. Do you realize that a lot of the early Charlie Chaplin stories didn't have a story? There wasn't telling you something. It was just a quick scene of something funny, right? And that's what it was. And so he knew, listen, there's got to be a way to tell stories. Stories should be told with intentionality. What's intentionality? purpose, drive. Like there's a goal in mind. I'm traveling to Dallas, which means my intention is to get to Dallas. So my actions had better move toward Dallas, right? All of the directions I take. So he designed something very interesting. Things like plot lines, flow, story arcs, developing characters and scenes, they weren't a thing back then as they are prominent nowadays. Real stories have to have intimate threads connected to every part of the story. These seemingly unrelated events and stories have to connect to the larger picture or the larger person when it is. So what ended up happening, he got his small illustration team together, and this happened in the mid-1920s, and he developed something called a storyboard. And I know for many of us, what did we just do the other day? You had to write a speech.
Yeah, we took down notes.
Yep.
And then I put them in a specific order.
Yes. She took down notes, so she was writing a speech about a specific person, William Bradford, right? William Bradford. And William Bradford, she found out a whole bunch of notes, and what she did was she wrote down all these notes, and she said, okay, how should I put them in order? That's what a storyboard is. Storyboard, and I know for many of us, we're like, yeah, we learned this in English class. They didn't back then. This was not a thing back then. Over 100 years ago, this was not a thing. So what they would do, a storyboard, just to sum it up very quickly, he would draw about 100 scenes of what was going to happen in this one story he was telling, whether it be Mickey Mouse, Goofy, whatever, it doesn't matter, okay? And he would write down all this 100 pictures, right? And then he would start moving the scenes to see what would make the most sense. There has to be a common goal. In Pinocchio, what is the goal? If anybody's ever seen that one. To be a real boy, right? The goal was that. And there was a whole slew of adventures in between that. Pinocchio had to come to some realization that he actually needed and loved his father. Rebellion, it didn't work out for him. There were all these threads that tied it all together to be a real boy, which I'll tell you right now, if you actually guys read the real story, it's actually tragic, but Disney did put a nice twist on it. So to define a storyboard, this is planned out series of events made up of images or words that tell a specific narrative. This is a way to tell a story with intentionality or purpose. So in other words, as you're writing it, and I don't know, how many of you have ever read like a novel from like the late 1800s or early 1900s? Okay, I have two. Do you notice that they're different than stories today? Way different, okay? It felt to me when I was reading some of those older ones, we'll call them classics, it felt like it was a 12-year-old going, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. But when you read them today, they leave everything away, and they make you weave the pieces together in your mind, usually. So you can see the thread of the story as it follows. And this is what he brought to the world. So this is an example of a storyboard. So yours and my story could be told using this, which is what I would like to do today. Today, as with the children's story, I kind of went through my own story. This is going to be kind of one of those, a little bit, just a little bit. So if you are writing your own narrative, this might be where you could start, okay? You could go birth, and I would highly recommend anybody to do this if you'd like to do it in a fun way. Go ahead and pull out one of these and start drawing pictures or taking pictures down or writing something in there. This is going to seem weird at first, but please just run with me with this, and you'll see how this ties directly into the gospel and how our own lives are a story arc. So if you were writing your own story, you could start with any one of these. You could start with your birth, first memory, key people, defining events like a major event in your life. And then finally, you could go to, okay, this is today. What are my goals for tomorrow? In Psalm 139, it talks about this when it talks about David talks about his birth. See, there are things that happen even before we're born, which is fascinating. Because even things as simple as levels of nutrition in the mother can affect a child's entire future. It really, really can. My sister, for example, she was born a preemie just a few weeks earlier than what she was supposed to be born. My sister is only like cha big. That's it. She was this tall since about 7th grade, and she was done. She was born prematurely, right? So it changed her entire future, her entire outlook. Psalm 139, though, David talks about this before he was born. It says, this is Psalm 139, verse 13. It says, "For you created my innermost being. You knitted me together in my mother's womb." And you can keep going, and it talks about, "I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well my frame was not hidden from you." See, even before David was born, he knew there was an intentionality there from God. It was there. If we continue on, we can go to, you're writing your own narrative or I'm writing mine, we can go to other stuff. We can go to major goals, 1 year out, 2 year out, 3 year out, 5, 20. Interesting thing is you can go even to your eulogy. Can I tell you a story? At about 7 or 8 years old, I realized I was going to die one day. Yep. I know that sounds tragic. It's like, what, a 7-year-old? No, because my mind is inquisitive. And I was like, what? And actually another thing that really amazed me was my mom said, I was your age one day. I wasn't born under a rock. Oh, so the stuff I'm going through, you've already been through. Oh, maybe I should listen to my parents. Yeah. Yes. And by the way, guys, yes, I was your age once too. So everything you're going through is nothing new. I've already been through it. Or mom has been through it. So the reason I bring this up, though, is because I thought about my eulogy. I thought about, and here's just something for you to think about. You can think about your eulogy and think about, okay, what would it be like if I wasn't here? What would people say about me? Yeah, I know. I hear some laughing. I'm glad I hear laughing because that means you're thinking. Because here's the question. Is it going to be good stuff? Are you going to start thinking about what would my sister say about me? Ooh, it might not be a whole lot of good stuff. But you know what's interesting about that? I'm not dead. I don't have to hear my eulogy right now, which means I can rewind the tape, and I'm right now here in the present, and I can make a choice to affect that eulogy down the road. Well, what would my dad say about me? Oh yeah, it would be good. Okay. What about my mom? Yeah, that would be good. What about this friend that I haven't talked to in X number of years? Okay, rewind the tape. I now have a choice. I now have an intentionality where I can build that rift back together. Okay? And I have friends that I have not spoken to in 20 years, guys. Some of them, if I were to talk to them right now, they would not be happy with me. Others, it would feel like literally 5 minutes has passed since the last time I talked to him. Scove, one of my friends in Maine. I absolutely love the guy. Every time we talk, we only talk a few times a year, but we'll call each other on the phone, and him and I were absolute best friends growing up. He was my other best friend that didn't get me into trouble, just so you guys are aware, okay? He was the one that actually cared about me as a person, and it literally feels like I just called him last week, and it could be 6 months down the road. It's one of those things. But I have other friends that if I were to call, it would be weird and awkward. Why are you calling me? Maybe I need to rebuild those rifts. Which, by the way, guys, going through this really, really, really affected me. So let me talk a little bit about my storyboard. Just a hitch. I was born to grandma and grandfather Becker, Janet, and Thomas. And yes, if you couldn't tell where I get my weirdness, it is from him right there. That is absolutely true. My mom is the reserved one, and I love my mom and dad very dearly. But it was weird because at a very early age, I ended up finding out, what does that note down there at the bottom say? Anybody read that? That didn't make sense to me. So my birth, I was born into a family as a firstborn and a secondborn, which kind of threw me off. And this was like, I was telling you, like about 7 or 8 years old, I was thinking about my eulogy. Like I was thinking about, okay, I would actually not exist anymore. I would die one day, right? And it kind of threw me off. And it was these kind of things that my birth was into a world that was, I automatically had 2 roles. I was firstborn and I was secondborn. I was part of a family, and I never thought of my brother, by the way. I never thought of my half-brother as my half-brother. It never dawned on me. Still to this day, it doesn't fit. He's my brother. Do you know what I mean? And so this reality, it's a reality, never really quite clicked, but it is part of my story arc, my storyboard. Let's keep going. First heavy memory, husband and wife. I saw my mom and dad in absolute love with each other. Don't think of this as gross. I know most people do. But I saw my mom and dad kissing in the kitchen all the time. I would catch them kissing all over the house. Some people find it very gross. I'm glad you asked that. Why is that gross? Some people find it very gross, especially kids, when they see their parents kiss. But my kids know that my wife and I hold hands while we walk and that kind of stuff. See, but here's the thing. This is one of my first memories is I remember seeing that. I remember to this day the memory where I saw mom and dad hugging and I saw my mom and dad walking down the road holding hands. And I said, I want that. Whatever that is, I want that. And so I remember another thing that my mom ended up telling me. She said, well, Justin, if you want, it was one of those like in passing type of things. I bet you if I asked her today if she remembers saying that, nope, I guarantee no. But she actually said, Justin, then start praying for your wife. I was like 6 or 7, like I was really little. We'll start praying for your wife. That's a good idea, Ma. So I started praying for my wife. But as I got older, I started going into high school and obviously regular school and so forth. I thought I had a knack on what love really was. And then I dated this girl for 2 years. Hopefully, if you realize when I said dated for 2 years, I'm not talking about my wife. I dated this girl for 2 years. And guess what happened, guys? She was another Chad. Guys, filling in the blanks there? She was another Chad. She was a person that would genuinely be angry at me until I had to do something to bring her back out of her anger. So our entire relationship was fully dependent upon her mood at all times. Can I just tell you guys something? That is manipulation. She didn't realize it. Mind you, she was young. We were only in high school when we were dating. Okay, I get that. She was just, 17, 18, 19 years old. Okay, but that's manipulation. If you actually love somebody, your emotions should not dictate how you treat them. If you actually care about them. But then I met someone. This is a major shift in my life because I thought up to that point I knew what love was. Once that other girl left me, for a friend of mine, by the way, I'm genuinely not bitter about it anymore. I'm really not, but it was just one of those things where it's like, okay, that's just icing on the cake, guys. Like genuinely, she actually calls Tanya and I. We actually got, like, we're actually friends now, and she calls my wife and I, and it's fine. It's no big deal. But my thing is she, like, the phrase broke your heart? Yeah, I didn't know what that is. Anybody ever experienced that? Genuine broken heart. Genuine brokenheartedness. I mean that. Where your heart physically feels like a chunk of glass that has been shattered inside your chest. Yeah, right. I did too. And it wasn't until I met her scowling at me and glaring at me with knives in her eyes across the drawing desk in art class. And I said, I like that. So, she was sitting across from me. And guess who was sitting to my right? Some of you know the story. My wife's mom. So I got in with her mom. And her mother ended up, literally, her mom ended up hooking us up together. Literally. You know that kid that sits across from you in art class? Yes. Well, his name's Justin. I don't care. And yeah, so needless to say, we ended up getting together. And here's the thing. It wasn't getting with Tanya that helped me understand what love was. It was the fact that I met a family that actually says, I love you all the time and acts like it. Now, I don't mean that to degrade my family. My family was all acts of service family. We did stuff for each other to show that we cared for each other. We didn't say I loved you. We barely ever hugged. We didn't hug and kiss each other, that kind of thing. Like, we just weren't that kind of family. And it wasn't until I got to Tanya's family and her mom was hugging me. And it was like strange. Not like in a bad way, but like filling a void in my life that I didn't know I had. Nothing against my parents. Once again, I lived a very good life growing up. I had a great family. This is nothing to degrade them. It was just something that was different. And that broken, shattered chunk of glass that was in my chest was now starting to seal back up with a searing heat that I just cannot explain to you. It was so strange. And then we ended up meeting one of her friends. And one of her friends was, because this was the thing that I was so worried about when getting to know her. One of her friends was like, so why aren't you guys dating? Because at the time we were just kind of like getting to know each other. Like I would come over for dinner and, back in the 50s, you'd call that dating. But nowadays, dating is different. It's like, I don't know. How yeah, thank you. The talking phase. That's what it's called nowadays. We were in the talking phase, very much talking phase. And so anyway, I ended up meeting one of her friends, and one of her friends goes, well, why aren't you guys officially dating? Why don't you guys just make it official and start getting to know each other and hanging out more and that kind of thing? And I said, well, I'm not sure where she is spiritually. And that was my biggest concern, because the other person I just got done dating was so on a different spiritual level than I was. And I don't mean that in a degrading way. I really don't. I just mean you cannot be unequally yoked. It's just turmoil. It really, really is. And I knew that. And then I ended up realizing that this woman she has some one-liner zingers when it comes to spiritual wisdom that I have a lot to say, guys, and she doesn't. But when she does, she's got something important to say. Like, she's one of those people that just boom and drops a bombshell of truth on you. She's not and walks away like, oh, like it was, duh, of course that's the truth. Like, I never thought of it that way. Thank you. Anyway, that was a major shift in my life. So this question ended up stirring up in me later on, and it was love. And I realized that love needed freedom, but unfortunately, freedom means risk. And I've discussed this before, and this is kind of some of the foundation that I really wanted to go on to, is there was a fundamental clarity that was brought into my life because of these events. Let's talk about your storyboard. Storyboards in your own life should do three things. It should stir up self-awareness. There should be intentionality in your life with the storyboard, and there should be a level of critique. I would say critiqueness, but I know it's not a word. There should be a level of critique in your life now. Romans 12:3 states, for I say, through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought. Than he ought to think, but to think soberly according as God hath dealt to every man the measure of faith. This is self-awareness. Now, yes, I understand if you read this chapter, he's talking about the body of Christ. Same point, though. He's talking about being self-aware. I've spoken about Carl Jung before. He is a psychologist, and he studies psychology, or at least he did study psychology. He wrote a lot of stuff on psychology. And one of the things that he said was, until you make the unconscious conscious, it, meaning the unconscious, will direct your life, and you will call it fate. I'm pausing because I want you to think about this for a second. People who walk around going, well, whatever just happens, happens. They are not aware of their unconscious actions and decisions. Have you ever heard of the term fatality? Guess where the root word for fatality is? Fate. As in, well, it was their time to die. But the fact is, there are factors in your life, in my life, that lead to the events of stuff happening in your life. If you are walking down the street and you trip over a rock and break your ankle, well, guess what? There were 1,000 things that had to happen for that rock to be placed in that spot and you to walk over to it and trip and break your ankle. You understand what I'm saying? The tripping and breaking the ankle was not an event that happened to you. There was 1,000 series of events that happened, okay, that led to you walking and you get tripping and breaking your ankle. That's a big difference. This is the difference as in life happens to me and you making conscious choices in your life. Big, big difference. The adult, and I kind of like this phrase, kind of threw me a little bit first time I read it. The adult must carry the child to adulthood. So in other words, Jasper, you have an adult Jasper inside of you that is trying to carry the child Jasper to adulthood. The man is hiding inside the boy and the lady hiding inside the girl. I notice I did not say woman. I believe that the term woman and lady are two different things. Forgive me. That's for another subject. The Bible is always bringing forth what is hiding into the open, into the light. That's what the Bible is doing, okay? Many of us look around and we say, and we've said this before in our Sabbath school studies and so forth, you're missing the point. Missing the point means something's hiding. Something is hiding in the darkness, and this is what Jesus was trying to do always. He's trying to pull it to the light. Every good thing in life must start with honesty and integrity. Be honest with yourself. Yeah, I want to read this. I almost missed a note. I need to know about everything in my subconscious or habitual life and bring it to the light. I have to know that. If I do not know that, something is being hidden. 1 John 4:18 and 19 says, this all has to do with being self-aware. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear hath torment. He that feareth is not made perfect in love. We love him because he first loved us. Let's break this down real quick. Fear is a natural state we're in. Fear is a liar. I like that song, yeah. Fear is the natural state we live in, though. As human beings, fear is what we live in. Fear is the fishbowl that we live in. It really, really is, okay? And this is breaking down that 1 John 4, okay? Yet, fear is the source of torment in our life. When Adam and Eve first sinned, what did they do? They ran. When they heard God walking in the garden, right? Why did they run? They were full of fear. They were full of guilt. They were full of shame. All these things are fear. They're all fear-based things, okay? And it led to torment. Obviously, some of us know the rest of that story. Love is the cure for fear. This is what 1 John 4 is saying. But here's the kicker. Here's the thing that really brings it together. We must be loved before we can love. To really know yourself and to have a capacity to grow at all. Let me rephrase that. Or let me say that again, I should say. To have the capacity to grow at all, you must identify your deepest fears and your deepest desires. Now, I'm not going to ask you guys what your deepest fears or deepest desires are. I believe that's something between you and God. But if you don't understand those things, my question to you is, how can you grow? What is there to grow from if you are hiding those things that are your deepest fears, deepest desires? To the degree I receive love, my fears and insecurities subside, and they therefore are empowering me to give love. Let me go back to that verse real quick. What does that bottom phrase there say? We loved him because he first loved us. How much love does God have? I hope those of you mathematicians out there, I hope you're putting the math together here. To the degree I receive love, my fears and insecurities can subside, and it empowers me to give love. See, if I'm trying to give love without first receiving it, it is a job and not a very enjoyable one. I know it because I lived it. Because I wasn't receiving love from someone. The moment that you know you are loved and accepted, you can finally change. If not, then you are constantly trying to reach a state of betterness, we'll say, under your own power. So you're trying to live a holy life. You're trying to live a life of love under your own power without the power of the one loving you. See, the interesting thing is and I've had this, I say argument, but I've had this discussion before with other people. Well, I can love someone and they are receiving love. No. Love is always a two-way street. If I am lavishing love upon my children, if they do not accept that love, that doesn't diminish my love. But in their life, my love is diminished. Do you understand? They're not accepting it. I'm giving them the love, but if they are not accepting that love, funny story about that. We have plants in our office, and for something like 6 months, somebody was watering a plastic plant. That's what it's like. You're pouring it onto something that can't accept it. Or won't, in this case. If someone is not willing to accept the love, then the question is, okay, is it love? Well, yes, it's love still, but it's just a one-way street. So let's go to the next one, intentionality. Another quote from Carl Jung, and then I'll ask you a question here. I am not what has happened to me. I am what I choose to become. What do you think you guys... What does that mean? Somebody. What was that? We're not simply a product of our environment or circumstances like that. We're not. This is a sharper way of saying it. Some people it may work better with, some may not. But if we are sitting in our life and just waiting for stuff to happen to us, instead of making genuine intentional choices to do something, to engage, to accept, whatever, then this is all it is. We are living a life of fate. Well, we let fate decide, even though fate is a nonsense term. Can anybody think of a story or a person in the Bible that a whole lot of circumstances happened to him for a while? Job. Oh, I got Jonah and I got Job. Well, I chose Job. Good job. Job 14:1-2 says, man that is born of a woman is of few days and full of trouble. He cometh forth like a flower and is cut down. He feeleth also as a shadow and continueth not. Live your life intentionally. This is literally saying man is like a fleeting flower. The moment it's cut, it's over. I choose to. See, when you end up studying, and I didn't study a whole lot of Greek philosophy, but a little bit at least, I do know Hebrew philosophy, though. When you start looking at Greek philosophy and Hebrew philosophy and start comparing the two, you end up finding out that Greco-Roman philosophy or concepts was I had to please the gods because they're in control of the fates. Things happen to me because of, and you name, fate, whatever external circumstance. I had a friend who always looked for numbers, okay? They looked for numbers and everything. Justin, what do you think it means? I saw my birthday in the lottery ticket. Do you think I should have bought it? Sure, go buy it. Like, you can only say it so many times, no. I love those friends, but it's just the thing. It is literally, is it biblical philosophy we're going to fall into, or is it Greek philosophy? The Hebrew philosophy is choose now. Who you shall follow. I choose, as for me and my house, we shall serve the Lord, right? What is that? Is that, oh, well, if God is happy with us, we'll accept it? No, what is that? That's an intentionality. That's I choose this day. A lack of self-awareness and intentionality breeds insecurity and defensiveness. Have you ever met somebody or been into a situation? I ask this because, although I almost ask it rhetorically because I'm pretty sure everybody has been, where you've been in a situation and you've just brought something up to a friend and they get super defensive about it. Super defensive. And you weren't even trying to start anything. You were just trying to have a conversation about their life or about the situation. And then all of a sudden, boom, it all blows up. Well, are they self-aware of that situation? Do they have intentionality about those situations in their life? But the moment you touch that button, boom, yes, it blows up. And maybe some of us can be that way too, about certain areas in our life. Critique. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. I hear some chuckling. What's that saying? What's it saying? Oh, what you're doing annoys the snot right out of me. But what you're doing is exactly, the reason I can recognize it is because I do it too. I recognize my faults in you, and it bothers me. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
He's Christian, right?
Yeah, if you look into him, he wasn't when he first started. He was actually a prodigy of, I think he was a prodigy of Freud to begin with, right? And then later on, he's like, this stuff doesn't make sense psychology doesn't make sense unless you put the creation into it, unless you put God into it. So yeah. Ephesians 2:15 states, his purpose, this is talking about Jesus, his purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of two, thus making peace. Verse 16 says, and in one body to reconcile both of them to God through the cross, by which he put to death their hostility. What are the two? What are the two bodies we're talking about here? What do you think? Without reading the whole thing, I understand I'm giving you just a snippet. Yes, perfect. It was the Jews and the Gentiles. He was of two bodies. In other words, he was trying to reach both. He was not just the Jews. He was trying to reach both. And here's the thing. Jesus... All right, let's go back to Jericho. The leader of the army of Jericho was standing on a hill one day praying to God. He heard someone walking up behind him. He whipped around and got out his sword, got ready to swing it, and said, whose side are you on? Well, how did the guy respond? Anybody remember? Neither. God's messenger comes down and says, I'm not on either of your sides. I'm not on Jericho's side, and I'm not on yours. Why? Because he's on God's side. Believe it or not, God is, and I've used this illustration before, but it hits home so hard. I could not imagine, although I would love it, but I could not imagine right now in my life having 10 children. Because as a parent, when you have 10 children and they're all bickering and fighting against each other, and you're the mother or you're the father of that child, of all 10 of those children, what is that? In your mind, you're going, why are you bickering? Well, he did this to me and I did this to me. Oh, you always take their side. I'm not on any of your side. I'm dad. Y'all need to chill. Like, y'all think that y'all have one side or the other, like there's 10 teams here. No, we're all Beckers. We're all one family, right? That's God's attitude. He's looking down and he's saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? Jesus came down and goes, why are we treating each other this way? In many instances, he had to, and I proverbially say this, kind of went to the disciples and said, you're missing the point. When Paul, do you remember when Jesus came down to Paul and blinded him on the road to Emmaus? And he came down and he goes, Paul falls on the ground and says, dear Lord. And Jesus goes, why are you persecuting me? Uh-oh. He knew those first words, why are you persecuting me? He knew something was off. I know this is God. I know there's something spiritual here. This is God. And why are you persecuting me? Jesus came down to break that hostility between us all. This is what he was trying to do. There is something special, and I've said this in our Sabbath school many times. The word I use often is be vigilant. The moment that we sit there and we say, I've got it, I've arrived, you're obviously not being self-aware. You're obviously not intentional on moving to someplace new. There's no goal in mind here. And I am unwilling to be critiqued. I'm telling you right now, guys, if I need to be critiqued, you have full permission to critique me. It's very hard to offend me, and I know I am a fallible person. So if I need critiquing, please, by all means, critique. I would rather not stay in a state of unholiness, unholy living. The definition of living a holy life is this. I understand there's more to it than that, but I just want you to look at these three things. If you are self-aware, living a holy life is easier because you've not arrived. Hollywood often does this. Often does this. Focus on your emotions because that's your reality right now. Oh yeah, your emotions lie to you all the time. All the time. And I put it in those words in that context because I want to let you know, if you're living a life of emotional choices, you are not being self-aware. Self-aware is being honest with yourself. Living emotionally is not being honest because emotions lie all the time.
You live emotionally, you're living like a mosquito. You're living by instinct.
Absolutely.
Life out of people.
Living like a mosquito. I like that. All other ground. Perfect. That's great, Mason. All other ground is sinking sand. If you're living intentionally, you're living a holy life.
Kingdom-mindedly.
Kingdom-driven, kingdom-minded life. Yes. And if you are able to be critiqued, what does the Bible say? What is this for? And I know that's kind of an ambiguous thing. It says this word is for instruction, reprove. Other versions actually use the word critique. Okay? God gave us this word so that we can live a holy life. It is designed so that we do not sit in a solid state of sin and never move forward. As a Christian, we should be malleable. Okay? We should be shapeable. We should allow the Lord to shape us. It's the hardened heart. It's the hardened life that is difficult. I brought this up, and I brought up some of my own faults and foibles, because I could have stopped my friends whenever that kind of stuff happened, and I could have made choices, could have made better choices. I thought I was doing okay in high school. I started prayer groups. I started Bible studies. Last I knew, years ago, I don't know, it was probably about 5 or 10 years ago, there was prayer groups still going on in my high school. I would like to hope that I had a hand in that a little bit. You know, God willing, the Holy Spirit kept moving. I don't know. That's great. But I also know I am full of foibles. I'm full of faults. Living a holy life is not a list of tasks to do. It is living a life of an intentionality. It's living a life where we have a direction. And I would encourage, genuinely, I started going through this, and I put my own storyboard together, sort of, a little bit of my storyboard. And it shook me a little bit, because I saw parts of my life, like the honesty. And I don't know if you guys, and all of you guys were not here 2 weeks ago when I preached, and I talked about how if we were to see ourselves for what we truly are, without the veil of the deceptions we've put around us, it would destroy us. If we saw us for who the real truth about who we are, we couldn't handle it. We are veiled in human flesh for a reason, because there are things that we are just not going to get right now. We are not going to comprehend right now. We're not going to get. And this is the intentionality of living a holy life. Being willing to say, hey, listen, if I mess up, it's okay to critique me. It's okay. I know being self-aware, I know I have a problem. I know I could have a problem. Thank you for letting me know. And I do mean that. You guys can call me out at any time. You can go ahead and come out. You guys can call me out at any time. I won't get angry, I promise. When I was younger, I ended up, a question was given to me from the pulpit. What if I'm wrong? That has followed me for years. Go ahead.
Our closing